Hello and welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. My name is Alex Hernandez. This is Dr. Craig Stern. We have three topics for you today. We're going to talk about drug shortages. Also, we have Shark Week this week, so we're going to talk about how sharks have contributed to our advancements in medicine. And also, we're going to talk about a new study done by CNN or by researchers who have provided the study to CNN about CTE. And first and foremost, we're going to talk about drug shortages. So hospitals have a long history of drug shortages. So it's nothing new, but it's coming up more often now. And I believe the general public would like to know like what causes these drug shortages.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Alex. Actually, interestingly, professionals have been asking, and nobody has a really good answer.
Hmm.
The pharmaceutical manufacturers say that it is the FDA, and the FDA has put too strong restrictions on manufacturing, and therefore they're at fault. The FDA has said no, it's the manufacturers. The manufacturers haven't held to good manufacturing practices in dealing with this. And further, that they don't seem to be paying a lot of attention to drugs that may not have as big of a profit margin. So as a result of that, they don't handle it. We also got into problems with some companies that were doing repackaging, that were taking bulk drug, putting it into syringes or to smaller packages because people didn't want to have to deal with the waste that was going on if you took a few cc's out of a big vial and they had to waste the rest. So it's a lot of all of those things that are a problem. Fundamentally, the biggest issue here is that there is a shortage. There's an enormous amount of emphasis going on today about specialty drugs that are made from biological sources. But there's a lot of these things that are older drugs. They're available, they can be made, and there has to be a major emphasis that's placed on manufacturers to say, look, this is where a significant amount of work has to be done for treating patients today. It's certainly important in hospitals, but it's also important in other areas where there just aren't enough drug availability, and as a result of that, people have had to switch, some of which may be okay, but a good deal of it isn't okay. There just aren't enough alternatives. And so the government, through the FDA and others, have to put a major emphasis on some manufacturers to say, look, we need these drugs. These drugs have to be made. They can be made for a given price. They'll pay a particular margin above it for profit. And the emphasis has to be on making those drugs, even if the federal government has to allocate certain manufacturers and say, you have to make these products.
So I believe you already answered my second question, where it says, "What roles do these agencies play?" Well, we talked about the FDA, and the FDA hasn't really paid too much attention to it,
Mhm.
to the drug shortage problem. Are there local agencies that maybe could help in preventing this kind of drug shortage?
Well, if the issue is that the products are not being made because they don't produce enough profit,
Mm-hmm.
then clearly there can be institutional investors that get involved and others, understanding that they're going to make a profit, but it's not going to be an enormous profit on making something like sodium bicarbonate or something that's necessary. But if you don't have that, then people with heart attacks and other issues are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, there is a certain premium to it, but this probably moves to that same issue of transparency that we've talked about before, and that is everybody wants to know what is the drug cost. They'll pay a certain premium to get it, and then perhaps another premium in order to deal with distribution and marketing and all of that. But they want to know what that cost is, and all of the agencies, whether they're public health agencies, private investor groups, the federal agencies like the FDA, Centers for Disease Control, have some control in trying to allocate to say, yeah, we're going to build new drugs. It's terribly important. Nobody's is diminishing their importance. But
Right.
at the end of the day, we want to build drugs that people need today, and they can make the major emphasis and get that going.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move along here, and I know a lot of people, I've seen it all over Facebook and Twitter, that everyone's excited about Shark Week. And there aren't too many facts of people know that people are not aware of, that sharks have helped in advancement in medicine, and it's continuing research right now. One of the ways that the sharks have helped is wound healing. They've We have created a device that was FDA approved called the OmniGraft Dermal Regeneration Matrix, and this uses shark cartilage and among other things to treat life-threatening burns and diabetic foot ulcers. And they've also Sharks have also helped in cancer research. There are proteins found in the shark's genome that has the potential to protect against cancer. The research is ongoing at the moment. I mean, it's not a stated fact yet, but its potential is a great thing. Hospital infections. They use the shark skin, and because the shark skin is rough and has other properties that can deter organisms from attaching to skin surfaces. So and these are just three of the many ways that sharks have helped benefit advancements in medicine. And I was wondering, Dr. Stern, you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's kind of fun. On a personal level,
Mhm.
I'd be more than happy to have people study sharks as long as I'm not involved.
Of
Um,
course.
and similarly with snakes and things like that,
Mhm.
which I have a personal aversion to. But other than that,
Most of
um,
us do. Yeah.
the main issue here is the following: drugs are found in chemical means where they make them in a test tube, like aspirin.
Hmm.
They are found from natural sources, and there's been all kinds of drugs like digoxin and others that have made from natural sources that they found in plants and flowers, weeds, and including algae and things like that. And there's some new studies where pond scum, algae,
Mm.
has a particular benefit because of photosynthesis. It extracts a significant amount of oxygen,
Hmm.
so it can be used for people that have life-threatening heart attacks and things like that, to give oxygen to the system and to try and maintain heart function. So sharks fit into that role. There's
Right.
also the other role, of course, of the specialty drugs that come from living organisms and that are built from those. But the point of the whole thing is that drugs come from multiple different sources.
Right.
Sharks do have a benefit, and frequently part of the issue is that there have been stories, and there's a significant amount where it's been used in ancient civilizations in China and others that have
Hmm.
used a lot of these things, and they've said that there's been some sort of healthcare benefit.
Right.
And in many cases, that has led to then further research in order to do it. And certainly in sharks, main issues are what element of the shark is the area that can give the greatest benefit? What's the dose supposed to be so you don't have a huge dose or something that's going to cause harm?
Hmm.
And third is, where and what can you do in order to identify that it may not have a benefit in one area, but it has a benefit in another area. Point is that drugs come from chemical means in a test tube. They come from natural means where you find them in plants, both on the land and in the ocean, and also from living organisms. So sharks do have a significant benefit, and it's more than just the TV or the movie approach to
Right.
see them grinding up people and everything like that, that there may be a benefit, and it is a benefit that's more controlled benefit.
Yeah, and I believe as a scientific communities continue to research genetic and understanding the proteins that bind to the genomes and more of that kind of stuff, we we also look at the animals and their capabilities, like when a lizard gets his tail chopped off and then grows back another tail, and or a shark, which in this case has a fast healing capabilities. Like when it's wounded, it heals up very fast, and that's probably where this started. Well, moving on to wrap this up, a new study reported from CNN 99% of the brains studied from NFL players that have died contain CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and which is a brain degenerative disease by repeated blows to the head. And I have played football before, and I'm sure many others have, and suffered many concussions in football. So, as more research is done on CTE, I've become more worried and weary. Am I remembering something correctly, or I'm sure my boss here has wondered if I had CTE as well. But I was just wondering if you had anything to add to the CTE studies and anything from experience.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, you brought this up to me, and to be honest, this has been studied quite a bit. There's a movie that was even made about it, about a doctor that did a study on it, and clearly there's an impact on it. I asked you before whether you played football. Would you let your son play football, and would you be worried about it? Things like that. There's something that's fundamental here that's probably even more fundamental than the concussion issue, and I'm not demeaning that in any way. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
The issue here is that medicine is moving more and more to prevention because it is easier to treat things if you prevent it than they have to treat it.
Right.
Okay. The problem that I see here is that we have something that we know is a problem. You know how you could solve it. You don't play. You don't play football. You don't play soccer. You don't play other things. But you're not going to stop anybody.
Right.
They're going to do it. There isn't anything that's going to stop from it. So we're caught in a thing where we know how to prevent it, but we know that people are still going to do it.
Right.
This is not unlike someone who has diabetes or knows that they can't have a piece of that chocolate cake that's sitting in front of them, but the chocolate cake is going to be there and they're going to eat it. So now we have an issue of we can prevent it, but what do we do? And I think that we're caught in that problem of more and more data is demonstrating that there's a problem. No question about it. It may not happen to everybody, but it certainly happens to some, without question.
Right.
Therefore, what do? You can make better pads, better helmets in order to try and deal with some of the reverberation concussion so that it doesn't hurt somebody to deal with it.
Change
the rules, but you're never going to do the whole thing where you change all the rules so that it's not harmful or people aren't hitting in order to stop a play, or in soccer that they're not hitting the ball with their head or something like that.
NFL's not going to become flag football.
No, it's not going to become flag football. So we're caught in the dichotomy of we have a problem, we know we can prevent it, but we don't know how do we go about, if you are still going to do it, how do you stop, how do you address that? And I think that, by the way, is a much bigger problem, and it's bigger than even concussions, and not in any way being pejorative to concussions, but people that have diabetes or hypertension but choose not to lose weight, choose to eat fatty foods, choose to deal with exercise, and they don't want to exercise. They're making a similar choice.
Right.
They know that it isn't going to go away. They know that there is a chance to prevent risk, or if not prevent risk, to lower the risk, which is the major issue, not preventing.
Right.
So in that case, if people are going to do it, people are going to have to make some particular choices. And if they do, one is they'll have to make choices about how much of something they're going to do. If they're going to play football, and what they're going to do to try and protect themselves. Two is after they've had a concussion or two, maybe they decide that that's enough, that's it. There was already stories last year with Tom Brady, the all-everything quarterback, that he had multiple concussions but didn't talk about it.
Right.
And there was a question about, do you believe the wife or do you believe all the people that say, no, he didn't have a concussion? Well, the argument still stands that people have to make the choice. So they've made a choice about it. And then finally is monitoring. How are you going to monitor it to try and deal with it? Because a life is a matter of choices. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. If you make a choice and it isn't necessarily the best choice, how are you going to monitor it and then deal with it over time? And you may, if you take the choice, if you make the choice, you may have to live with the consequences.
Right. And they also mentioned then when trying to diagnose a concussion, like say on the football field, it's hard to actually diagnose whether a player is concussed and if you have diagnosed them when they're actually ready to come back. I mean, it's a tough trade.
And that's part of that monitoring issue,
Yeah.
right? Because you've made the choice. I'm
Mhm.
going to play.
Mhm.
I may put myself at risk. And if I do, how do I monitor this to decide where's the point of no return?
Mhm.
Where's the point where I have to stop? Or where's the point where I can keep going and it's okay?
Yeah. Well, that's all we have for you today. We would like for you to visit our website. It's propharmaconsultants.com, and we have a free information page. It's called RxInfoX, and we will have new videos for you every Wednesday at noon. And please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any comments or questions about the topics that we talked about today, please leave them below. All right, we'll see you next week.